Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the show, Jasmine and I check in on our children through meaningful questions, especially where new and adverse environments are concerned. And later, Kevin Hines, suicide prevention advocate, best-selling author, speaker, and award-winning filmmaker, joins us to discuss intrapersonal come global efforts to be here tomorrow. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org.
Yeah, the inner ear changes as you grow.
I got like a letter from my inner ear that was just like, I'm out. Jasmine, it's great to see you.
Hi, Nathan. How you doing?
Good. So how's your family doing? How are the kids?
Great. They're doing great, and they're adjusting to summer camp, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. It's my daughter's first time, and so she is having a blast.
So, and how do you know that she's having a blast?
When she tells me about like certain parts of her day that really stuck in her memory, and she just wants to tell me about it, that's how I know she's had a really good day, is that she has that memory from the day. Because, you know, sometimes they're like, it was good. You ask them how their day was, and, you know, it was good. And there was like no other memory. But when she tells me like a memory she remembers from the day, I definitely know she's had a, you know, kind of a rock star day.
That is so fascinating, I think, as a marker of how they're doing, but also how they're developing. Because, you know, the marker that is experience and recollect and reproduce.
Right.
I am just consistently fascinated by, you know, the other day I picked up Winnie, and he's still in that kind of preschool age. And I said, you know, how was your day? He looks at me, says, keep on keeping on.
He said that?
Yes.
Aww.
And I was like, good usage.
Yes. Right. Like he knew the concept of it. Right. Yeah.
But then I was thinking, like, what does that mean in his head?
Right.
Sometimes kids use language that they don't understand, and then they come to understand the language. So I guess part of this, though, with what you're saying is in this space that is, I'm sending my kid to a new experience away. Mm-hmm. There's also this, am I doing the right things?
Yeah. Is it the right place for them? Are they going to make friends? Like, all those like normal questions start to pop in your head. Like, are they getting along during the day? And I'm not going to lie, she cried the first few days. Like she cried because I think it was just so out of her normal routine of going to kindergarten and seeing her friends every day. And now all of a sudden she's in a new environment, and now she's making new friends and she's in a new space. So it took her a little time to adjust. But at the same time, she's experiencing things that I probably wouldn't have known to expose her to, you know, because she's in a camp setting, and, you know, they have their plans and their themes and things like that. So she's learning throughout the day and stuff like that. So when she recollects a memory, I'm like, okay, I have a little insight, and she feels comfortable enough to say something about it, or like it was meaningful enough where she told me about it.
Well, you're also prompting the recollection, which I think is incredibly important, because you can get in this space as a parent where you're like, how was your day? Good. Move on.
Exactly.
Right. Because you've got so many, like your day is just beginning once the kids come home in a new phase.
Right.
Because now you're in that phase of it. So I think that, you know, allowing kids to recall and giving them that space gives them a pathway for, wait a minute, recollection is actually important to my viewpoint.
Right. And it's also about the questions you ask too, right? Like sometimes I'll ask, like, who did you play with? Just to see like if she can remember her friends' names and things like that. Or I'll say, ooh, ooh, what did you do in art today? And I'll ask like a specific activity, because sometimes they'll let you know, like, this is what we're doing for the day. And so I'll ask her like, more specifically to that time so that she can start to
put
think back.
timestamps.
Yes,
Be
exactly.
like, okay, this is how it progresses.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I had kind of a reaction. It was not to something you said. It was to the idea of what feels like plot pointed or plotted adversity, right? Like you are giving your kids this period of kind of adversity because they're going to grow within that.
Right.
But it also makes me uncomfortable because of our past conversations around, remember when you were telling me what is violence, the concept of violence, and that kind of free form, uncontrolled adversity is so much different. Mm-hmm. So I'm acknowledging that because I wanted to know, like, into your mind with camps, when is that adversity too much? When is that adversity worth putting them in?
I kind of went through that with my daughter with soccer. I signed her up for soccer and she just absolutely didn't respond, didn't engage at all. And I think that, at the Boys and Girls Club where she's at right now, it gives her a little taste of everything. And so when I hear about the points in her day, right, because she's leading the conversation, right. When she has a bad day, I'll know about it because she'll say, this person did this to me. And that opens the conversation to some sort of adversity, that more broader topic of like, what is violence? Or, when someone hits me, what's the conversation to have? But your child's leading that conversation.
Exactly. And part of that, I think that exercise is allowing for personal agency because, like in my head, the way I recollect events depends on how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. And I can have that same event happen and recollect it differently based on, say, if I'm down or if I'm irritable. Exactly. And then I revisit that thing and I see it a totally different way. So, even in the recollection, I think you're giving yourself ownership, but that's later. That's like some adult, you know what I mean? Like,
right. But it starts with like setting that foundation of helping them process their day, because sometimes as adults, we don't know how to name our emotions. So like when she's having those conversations with me about like, oh, someone hit me. And I'm like, how did that make you feel? What did you feel like you could talk to your teacher? Like those are those conversations that you can kind of have a little bit of insight into how they're feeling. And then it gets that conversation about how to name your emotions, because as a lot of adults don't know how to process their day and name their emotions, right? Because sometimes you're like, blah, I feel like blah, right? Yeah. And you just don't know how to process.
I had this thought last night. There's this book that I haven't read, All Joy, No Fun.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And part of it, I think, is my body is kind of keeping the score of how hard this is, where all of a sudden I'll be like, my back hurts. I'm sick. Am I having a heart attack?
Because your stress literally makes you physically sick.
But also we have to figure out how to help parents get out of that depth of pressure. Because you started this conversation by saying summer camp. I'm like, oh my gosh, we are in this hell of how do we take
figuring it out, what's right for your child and what they're going to engage in. And then what's available to you.
What's available?
Yeah.
What's right? What can you afford?
Right.
What can you rearrange?
Yes, to your schedule. And that's why I say, man, summer is really stressful on caregivers who have to figure out what childcare looks like. That in itself has a whole layer of emotions that then you have to deal with.
Do you remember when it felt like summer was a PM Dawn song?
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember PM Dawn?
No.
You don't? Oh my gosh. I'll put it in post. Summer used to just feel like this altered state.
Right. It was just like, oh my gosh, there's so much freedom to my day. Yeah. And like, look for things around you to keep you entertained or moving around and stuff like that. But hey, boredom comes, but then creativity comes.
So we haven't talked about what you're learning. You got something in the queue?
Oh, yes, I do. The governor just recently signed an executive order on essentially asking for organizations to partner together to come up with methods or boundaries for social media use, because it is such a crisis right now. And people are really trying to figure out how to moderate social media for teenagers because there's such a high suicide rate. And so I started digging, right? Like I was like, oh, this is really, curious. And in my work, I work with a lot of young adults and teenagers. And I tend to ask those questions of like, what do you use for social media? Like, are you on social social media? And, the funny answer is that they are, but a lot of them participate in different ways. So it's not necessarily all content creation, but it's mostly to participate with their peers. Obviously, nhpbs.org has this awesome segment called Above the Noise. It's the most relatable content that I found that is more current to this time, to what we're dealing with in terms of TikTok and social media use and how the brain works. And so I've used this segment with young adults and with teenagers to kind of explain how it works with your brain and how the algorithm comes together to feed you exactly what you want to see, what you want to hear, how you're thinking and how you feel. And that is very unsafe, right? Because they found that, about 50% of what's available on TikTok is untrue. And so you have all of these teens who are self-diagnosing. And so Above the Noise is a segment that shows teens exactly how it works in the brain and how groupthink works.
That has to do with belonging.
Yes.
And identity, which is really interesting. One, and if my wife's listening, I see you, I'm watching you, because I think adults are susceptible to this.
100%, because we also crave belonging. We also, because our brains are naturally hardwired to feel community, to seek community. And so social media provides that immediate response.
Right. And the validation of what your experience is. I think there's this really interesting absence of identity. And so we're looking constantly seeking identity.
Oh, yes.
Because if you look at, say, the political divide that we have going on, if I were to look at, say, my mother's feed versus my feed, mine is going to be way, way over here. And so my reality, what I perceive as the national conversation, is all around the things that I've previously clicked on or liked.
Right.
And her perception of that national conversation is 180 degrees. So her perception, our perceptions of a joint reality, there is no bridge between them.
Right.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with Leah Plunkett about her book, Sharon.
I remember that. That was a great conversation.
Yeah. And she talks about this engagement. She was citing, I think, Washington State and Utah doing some really interesting things. And now it's wonderful to hear that this administration is taking a look at it in New Hampshire.
More seriously. Yeah. And as I'm doing my work and I'm working with teenagers and young adults, that media literacy part for New Hampshire PBS is incredibly important, because we want to teach them to differentiate between misinformation and how to be able to look up a source and to make sure that it's correct information. Because if our teens and our young adults are only liking things that make them feel sad, that's what the algorithm is going to keep building. And so it's just going to add to that toxicity.
Yeah. So you really don't remember PM Dawn? You have no idea what I'm talking about?
No idea.
When were you born? What year?
94.
94? This conversation is over.
Yeah,
And when we come back, Kevin Hines joins us. Don't go anywhere. Many thanks to New Hampshire's Office of Social and Emotional Wellness for sponsoring this podcast. Started within New Hampshire's Department of Education, the Office of Social and Emotional Wellness consolidates policy development and implements projects and programs that are focused on health and wellness with an emphasis on behavioral health of all students, youth, and families. To learn more about the Department of Education and its many programs and approaches, visit www.education.nh.gov. Today's show was also brought to you by Burgoo Media, a full-service media company dedicated to helping nonprofits realize impact stories for print, video, social, and legacy media, and more. Both budget-conscious and grant-friendly, Burgoo Media helps your organization celebrate the humans in human services. Learn more at burgoomedia.com. Hey, it's Nathan, co-host of New Hampshire Family Now. I wanted to take a quick break from the show because it occurred to me that I've never asked you to subscribe to this podcast. Subscribing is free, and when you do it, it helps our placement algorithms, making it that much easier for caregivers across New Hampshire to find valuable information and strategies for their families. Also, you'll be alerted when a new episode drops. And if you like the show, leaving a review helps us that much more. So go to wherever you get your podcast, type in New Hampshire Family Now, and as the kids say, smash that subscribe button. I say click it, because if you smash it, then you're going to need a new one. Thank you and enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Kevin Hines, best-selling author, global public speaker, award-winning documentary filmmaker, storyteller, and my personal favorite, just here. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for reaching out and asking me to be on. I'm glad we could figure it out. It's awesome.
Now, I've been a fan of yours personally and your work for a long, long time. But for those who don't know of your work, where would the story of who you are today begin?
Well, if we're going to talk about where the story begins, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Born in abject poverty in San Francisco, in one of the worst neighborhoods there then, one of the worst neighborhoods there today. Birth parents, after they had me and my brother, succumbed to substance use disorder, hardcore drugs and alcohol. My brother and I were born 10 months apart. He was older. And we were taken from our parents, taken and placed into foster care because of their neglect. Not because they didn't love us, but because they had nothing and they had no one. And they did the best with what they had, which meant they paid these crack motel bills on the hour by the hour, or we were out. And in order to do that, they had to engage in, using, scoring, and selling drugs and other things to keep a roof over our heads. So you could easily say that I've lived with generational trauma from infancy. I was taken into foster care. In foster care, my brother and I were supposed to be adopted together. He passed away. We both got a vicious strain of bronchitis and he died. And I look back at that and think I never got to see him grow up, be there for him. It was all robbed of me and my family because people didn't care enough to take care of a sickly child. And it makes you think, the foster care system itself is so very broken, much like the mental health system in America and around the world. And, there's a high propensity for foster youth to die by suicide. There's a high propensity of foster youth to end up on drugs and alcohol and die of overdoses. There's a high propensity of that they will be without homes and homeless. And so much more happens to foster children. But I always say, unlike my poor brother, I got lucky. I landed in my first grade foster home after 5 failed ones after my brother died. And I want to give a shout out where a shout out is due. Peter and Deborah Muller, thank you. They took me in and they were a transitional home. You couldn't stay there. They were just the place you go and then you get picked up and adopted by a family. And one fateful and lovely day, a young woman named Deborah Joan Hines walked in their door. If you're paying attention, this works out. Debbie walks in that door, but she's fully expecting to take home a little girl. There were plenty in the house to choose from. And Debbie Hines is planning to adopt a little girl to become the sister of Elizabeth Catherine, the girl she and Patrick Kevin had already taken in. But the first thing she sees on the carpeted floor is me. Maybe full head of hair back then. And she decides in that moment, this is the child I want to take home, because she said in her journal of those days, that was the moment she fell in love. And she goes home to Patrick Kevin Hines and he says, let's take him in. He needs us. And they took me in. It was incredible. They saved my life. They are my mom and dad. Marcia and Martino are my mother and father. They birthed me. They made me. But Pat and Debbie are mom and dad.
Yeah.
Here's the deal with them. They go and decide to take in 3 kids from 3 separate homes into one household and make this kind of melting pot of a family. And they take in me, this mixed kid, my black brother, my white sister, and people were just like mesmerized and like, what the hell's going on over there? Women would cross the street to talk to my mom when she walked with the 3 of us. And they'd do this semicircle around us like some kind of lion pride. And they'd be like, excuse me, miss, how did all of that happen? And my mom would very quickly and aptly reply, oh, different fathers. Which was epic because it was true.
Yeah.
The 3 of us kids would have the greatest nurturing kids could ever have after our being in terrible foster care situations. Pat and Debbie changed all of that. And you'd think that would be enough. But the 3 of us kids would each see the inside of 3 separate psych wards before we were all 30 years of age because of our brains, the single most powerful organ in your body, mostly on automatic mode, controlling every action, inaction you take, decision and decision. And for lack of a better way of saying it, if your brain is malfunctioning, there goes the rest of you. So growing up in the Hines household was beautiful, yes. But at 17, it all came crumbling down for me because my brain just broke. I had a complete mental breakdown. And I ended up having that breakdown on a stage in a theater performance in front of 1,200 people. And I had to run off stage mid-play. The director had to come on and finish my role. It was a really trying time. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know these things that I learned later were called symptoms were symptoms. I just knew I was losing my mind. And I knew I was in a desperate amount of lethal emotional pain shortly thereafter, which is what leads people to suicide. A lethal emotional pain that is no one's fault. And people who die by suicide don't die because they don't die in spite of other people. They don't die because of other people. They die because of a lethal emotional pain that they can't escape. Let me ask you, Nathan, and I want an audible answer if you can. What is the one thing you want to happen when you find yourself in excruciating physical pain? What do you want that pain to do?
I want it to be over.
You want it to stop, go away, and be over. That's physical pain. My argument, being in the field of suicide prevention for 23 years, is that brain pain, what we all call mental illness, is 300,000 times worse than any physical pain I've ever experienced in my life. And it's worse because the people around you invalidate your pain. You cannot see it, so it must not be real. It's not a cast on your arm. It's not liver, heart, lung, or kidney disease I can diagnose and see with a scan. It's not a cancer of any other organ in the body. It's in your brain. And your brain can become diseased just like any other organ in the body. And arguably, it's the most important one that's connected to everything else. Without it, nothing else works. So in explaining all of that, at 19 years of age, I became so broken that I left off the Golden Gate Bridge to try to attempt to take my life. 99.99% of the people that have done that in the last near century are gone. I feel very grateful that I'm alive today and I survived what I did. Every moment is a gift. It's not easy. You know, the biggest mistake people make when they learn about my story is they assume I'm well and recovered. No, I'm sorry. I'm in recovery every day, like one would be from substance use disorder. I work and fight to be well.
I had a quick question about that because there's so many things I admire about you. And maybe most importantly to me, at least, is your willingness to talk about this because we're putting this out there. We're having the conversation on this platform and you're having it globally, right? And so I feel like this is a conversation, though, that as a society we'd rather not have. So why is the mere fact of having it openly so critical to us as a people?
Yeah, I think the mere fact of having this conversation openly and why it's so critical to people in pain is that there are so many millions of people. Right now, there are 1 billion people around the world, 1 billion people around the world struggling with brain pain of some kind, a brain health, mental health crisis, right? So if 1 billion people are going through it, those are only the ones that are talking about it.
Right.
I would wager to say the number is far greater. When you look at things like people who are narcissists, which is also a diagnosed mental struggle, and they don't usually get treatment or get help because they don't think anything's wrong. When you look at people who are living with sociopathy or psychopathy, when you look at people who are diagnosed with bipolar, schizophrenia, major depression, anxiety, when someone has a co-occurring brain health disorder. So when someone has drug use issues and then those diagnoses, you have to look at all of these aspects of the human condition and of society as a whole. And I think having the conversation, in my opinion, at the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table of every home must occur because right now, more teens are dying by suicide than homicide, AIDS, liver and heart disease, and lung disease combined. So the time now is not to push away from the conversation. The fear of parents with their children is that if they bring up the topic, they will put the thought in the person's mind. That's a myth. That's not how it works. If you bring up the topic and you do it in an educational, non-sensationalistic, and hopeful way, you're giving that person, that individual, however old they are, permission to speak on their pain, and a pain shared becomes a pain halved. So it's very important that we have the discussion of brain and mental health in every household on a regular basis to target the people that are in the most amount of pain to help keep them safe, even from themselves.
Now, this is such a great way to frame it, because in my head, when I was asking that question, I was thinking, okay, there's an inside-outside component, right? Like us, there's the people, the environment, and saying, hey, this is all around us, right? There are, as you said, 1 billion plus facing these challenges. But then the inside component is if I am all of a sudden raising my hand and saying, yeah, I'm one of them too. The conversation then becomes a pathway to not feeling alone or isolated.
It's a very important question. I think you have to address, first of all, that we have to recognize if we raise our hand and say, I'm struggling with A, B, C, D, E, F, not everybody you turn to is going to be willing to empathize with your pain. Not everybody can understand it. Not everybody can be there in that moment. Not everybody can empathize. A lot of people have apathy. And so you have to target and find the people that are willing to hear about your pain sit with you in it and help you get past it. And that's really the hard part, because you have a lot of people in the world that write to me and say, I have no one. I have no one. I'm all alone. They've pushed out everybody else in their life. They've had a terrible time making new relationships as adults. They're struggling deeply and they feel so desperately alone. So to those people, I have to say, first and foremost, you, the person who feels like they have no one, nothing, and no one to turn to, has to become your own best advocate. You have to be the one to say, I'm going to put in the work, the time, the effort, and the energy to stabilize my brain pain and survive my struggles, no matter what I'm going through. That's a tall order for someone going through a diagnosed brain health struggle.
Right.
But it's not impossible. And I say this from experience. After my third psych ward stay, my family, my friends, my colleagues were done. Either get into a halfway home for the mentally ill or you're homeless.
It seems like the conversation in the broad societal level is so critically important to making sure that someone can exist because we're having it. And, because I'm a fan of yours, I see a lot of images of you with that T-shirt that says "You Are" on it, which I love, because the idea of "You Are" as being a personal mantra or anthem, like we have to fill in that gap. You know what I mean? Like with that anthem in that blank.
Yeah. So let's talk about the people that are potentially like suicidal now, chronically suicidal, or struggling with these ideations or thoughts. The whole "You Are" thing is when you look at those hoodies we have, it says "You Are" here on the bottom of the pocket of the hoodie. It says "important," and then it defines the word "important." There's the literal dictionary definition of the word "important." And people love those shirts because when they go to the gym or they go outside and they wear those, people say, "What does that mean?" And and where did you get that? And they have a strike up a conversation, and then they get to talk to a perfect stranger about their mental health. It's an incredible thing. The same thing occurs with the Be Here Tomorrow shirts and the Hope Up Field shirts and everything beyond. And the point of doing that and putting that out there is because we want people to take ownership of their own struggles. We want people to no longer blame others, no longer use it as a crutch. We want them to completely take 110% responsibility for their own potential diagnoses or struggle, and then get the education to change things. I always say, all of us are going to pass away. None of us have cracked the code to immortality. Give yourself time plus hard work for things to change. My father always said, Kevin, hard work, because nothing good ever came without it, right? And that can go for everything. Everybody wants the Uberification of life right now. They want their groceries in 10 minutes. They want the pill that makes them lose weight. They want the Uberification of their existence now. That's why so many young people have stopped engaging in long form video content. They only like the 30 seconds to 1 minute clips. And if they're not wrapped in by the first 3 seconds, they want nothing to do with it, even though it has value, even though it has meaning, even though it could help them, And so to answer your question, back to what you're saying, is that I think that when you're dealing with people that are struggling this way, if you don't open up the idea to have the conversation, they're not going to likely open up to you by themselves. Right. They need it pulled out of them because they're ashamed. Mm-hmm. They're discriminated against. They have a deep sense of fear that if I allow myself to be vulnerable, someone's going to capitalize on that vulnerability in a negative way and affect me in a harsh way. And it's going to make me feel worse. So to say that is to say this: all of society, and anyone watching, listening, viewing right now, who do not have a diagnosed brain health struggle, I'm asking you, I am saying to you, suicide prevention is all of our responsibilities. I'm saying, be bold enough to have the conversation. If you don't know how to have the conversation, you better listen right now. If you have the inclination, the idea that someone you love is contemplating suicide, sit them down and say, I want to talk to you for a minute. I'm worried about you. I love you dearly. You mean the world to me. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, but before I ask you those 3 questions, I need to know you're going to be 100% honest with your answers. This is a very important conversation to be had. It's necessary because I care about you so much. Here are the 3 questions. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? Do you have the means? Now, are you thinking of killing yourself is a question because you don't ask, are you thinking of suicide? Because there's a taboo on the word suicide. They're going to automatically say no. The language you use actually matters psychologically. The crisis text line has determined through their AI algorithm, which is hyper intelligent, that by asking those direct questions in that order, you get a more honest answer than the question, are you thinking of suicide? You get a more honest answer than you're thinking of self-harm, because by definition, self-harm is not suicide, it's self-harm. So we have to be aware of this, and we have to practice it on a regular basis. You can't just ask one time those 3 questions. You have to bring it up whenever you fear something may be awry. you have to also bring it up when you think things are great, because a lot of people are really good at silencing their pain and putting on a face that shows that they're just A-okay and fine. And those are the people that end up dead. And everyone else is sidelined and they go, what the hell just happened? I didn't see it coming. If we don't have the conversation, people will die. If we do have the conversation, people will be saved. And if we have it regularly, we can keep people safe from themselves who live with chronic suicidal ideation.
Now, you've done, in this conversation alone, a beautiful job of having it in an understandable way, but you've been having it now for some time through, your documentary, The Suicide, The Ripple Effect, your book, Cracked and Not Broken, and your own podcast, Hindsights with Kevin Hines, spelled like your last name. I'm curious to know, what's the reception that you're finding when you're getting into this conversation?
Well, let me give you a perfect example of someone that wasn't keen to come to my talk and then tell you what happened afterward. So I was at Camp Lejeune Marine Base some years back, talking to 10,000 Marines in 2 days. On the second day, a Lance Corporal walked up to me after my presentation crying. He took off his chevron, his rank pin, took it off his jacket, which he's not supposed to do, and he placed it on my lapel. I still have it on that suit. And he places it on my lapel, and he says, listen, I wasn't going to come to this stupid presentation. I thought it was another death by PowerPoint they give every year, but someone encouraged me to be here. He said it wasn't garbage. And as a matter of fact, I was going to take my life today, but because of you, I am not. Could you walk me to my CO? I need help. So I walked into his commanding officer and I said to his commanding officer, listen, he's struggling. He needs your help. He doesn't need his job taken away. He doesn't need his rank removed. He needs help and care and treatment and the ability to come back stronger than ever to serve this nation as a United States Marine. And the commanding officer said, done. That situation has repeated itself in person or via email or message or via social media message hundreds of thousands of times. In 23 years doing this work, hundreds of thousands of people we've counted have said this story, my story, saved their life. Now, I don't own that. I've never saved a life. I'm a conduit. I give a message. It's given to me by my higher power. I mean, a sea lion literally came to my aid and kept me afloat in the waters under the Golden Gate Bridge, where the Coast Guard boat arrived behind me. Without that sea lion, I would be dead. It's a literal miracle that I get to exist. I'm no lifesaver, but I'm a messenger that shares a story that relates to so many different people, because you've got foster care, you've got substance use, you've got depression and bipolar disorder, anxiety, panic attacks. You've got the whole realm of things that can connect to different people. And they write me all the time and tell me this saved their life in some way, shape, or form. But I want them to start giving themselves the credit they deserve, because they're doing the work. I don't get to be there with them every day.
Yeah. Now, I always, on a personal level, want to see more from you. I'm sure the folks listening would too. Do you have any projects in the hopper that we can look forward to?
Well, I do. And thank you for asking. As you mentioned, Hindsight's podcast is out, and we have 107 episodes. We're working on season 4 right now. And we talked to some of the most engaging, intelligent, and wonderful individuals who have triumphed over immense adversity, fascinating individuals. Even my brother-in-law, who lives with schizophrenia, is on the podcast. And it's really awesome. We'd be all these actors and celebrity type folks, but he has the most views on his episode. So the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kevin Hines, has 800 videos, all designed to better your brain, mind, behavioral, mental health, and well-being, and your physical health. And then we've got the next film we're making is The Net, chronicling the 87-year journey to raise the net and stop the suicide at the Golden Gate Bridge. The fact that as of December of this year, nobody else will ever again die off the Golden Gate Bridge. It will be the largest, brightest, most powerful beacon for suicide prevention right around the world. That film is going to be incredible. It's an investigative journalistic look into the 87 years and why it took so long to do the right thing, and the people that got behind making the effort possible. My father founded the Bridge Rail Foundation. I was a founding board member. We were the largest dog in the fight to stop suicide at the Golden Gate Bridge. We made it real. We changed public policy there. In San Francisco, we can change it anywhere. And now the Bridge Rail Foundation, founded by my father, is being utilized to put up nets, buildings, bridges, and tall structures, safety nets all over those endeavors, and keeping railways safe from suicides as well. And then next to that, a new book, The Art of Being Broken, How Storytelling Saves Lives, is on pre-sale right now. It drops officially for delivery on September 12th. And it's the #1 best-selling book in bipolar disorder currently for pre-sale, which is incredible already. And we just dropped a pre-sale recently. So we hope that everybody who wants to hear an update of the story, the last book ended in 2013. This book goes from 2013 until today.
Kevin, I am thrilled you came on. Thank you so much last minute for accepting the invitation. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you, brother. Nice to meet you, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Oh, and before you go, I got to ask how you got so swole. I'm seeing those arms, and I'm like...
I'm in the gym 6 days a week trying to get it done, and I'm doing the best I can.
To learn more about Kevin Hines and all available resources, go to bio.site/Kevin Hines story. That's bio.site/Kevin Hines story. And if you or someone you know is struggling emotionally, please reach out and get support. Call or text 988 for 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you and your loved ones, or best practices for professionals. Chat option is also available at 988lifeline.org. That's 988lifeline.org. And for New Hampshire information and resources around suicide prevention and mental health, visit NAMINH.org. That's NAMINH.org. Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. This podcast was brought to you by Nixon Peabody, who delivers exceptional legal services for clients in the community by combining high performance, an entrepreneurial spirit, deep engagement, and an unwavering commitment to a culture of collaboration, diversity, and humanity. Nixon Peabody works with universities, hospitals, and nonprofits of every size to maximize impact. For more information, visit nixonpeabody.com. Today's show was also brought to you by Merrimack County Savings Bank, who proudly supports the mission and efforts of New Hampshire Children's Trust. Founded in 1867, Merrimack has served people, businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in central and southern New Hampshire for over 155 years by treating everyone with care, respect, and compassion. Visit your local offices in Bow, Concord, Kentucky, Hooksett, and Nashua, or go to www.themerrimack.com.